Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. And today is kind of a different day in Nelson, BC. We had rain most of the day. It's really good to cut down the forest fire hazard, though, because it soaks down all the grass and the forest areas and the trees, the pine trees and spruce trees, and lowers the risk of fire hazard. So it's really a very positive thing. And it also puts moisture in the ground to help the crops grow and help the flowers and all the trees, the flowering trees grow too. I got a question for you. This is a question for people that are in the 75 plus era. So, we're people that, correct me if I'm wrong, I would invite you to correct me. We're people that's called the old school era. That means to say we went to school in the early days, and it was the days when the teacher had a strap hanging on a wall, and discipline was meted out depending on the temperament of the teacher. And if the students were pretty well behaved, everything worked fine. But every once in a while, the teacher, we had a crippled teacher who, Mr. Marion, Lionel Marion, he was at the Devereux School, and he had a crutch. He was born with one leg shorter than the other one, so he carried a crutch. He had a crutch under one arm and carried a cane on the crutch, and he used to balance on that and stand by his desk there and give lectures and talk and draw examples on the blackboard. And he was a very, very, very efficient teacher. And for the people who would listen to him, if you listened to him and ask him questions, you got a good mark. But every once in a while, there'd be a child from a school coming to school who was from a family where maybe the discipline in the family was a little bit low, and the child would let them do anything they wanted. So when the teacher gave them instruction, they would just ignore him, walk around the room and look out the window and all kinds of stuff. So every once in a while, he would say, "Okay, Elmer or Bob or Sam or whoever it was, you're not listening to me, so you ought to have a choice of sitting down at your desk and listening and paying attention," or he says, "I'll use a strap on your hand." So he'd point at the strap on the wall, and I guess in a period of about 3 or 4 years there, we seen one or two students get the strap on. He would get them up there and hold your hand out, and he'd swing the strap on and hit him across the hand. And of course, after you had about two of those on your hand turned red, and it got your attention. So that was the discipline thing at school, and they finally got outlawed because in some cases I think the teachers were. You get some teacher who was really strict, and it didn't work out that good. But any of the places, I remember one time in Dawson Creek we had a Mr. Sprinkling, and he was the principal at the local junior senior high school, and he was a wrestler. He was a very strong, heavy set man, and he wouldn't put up with any foolishness. And so what would happen every once in a while, you'd be sitting in the class, and there'd be a couple of kids get into a scrap in the hallway or some darn thing, and then you'd hear on the PA system, "Billy Smith and Sammy Jones to the office." And you'd know darn well from the past experience that they were going to go to get the strap. So they'd come back to the room, and their hands were all swelled up and a little bit red from the friction from the strap. But looking at it from the long distance, it wasn't, every kid in the school didn't get it. If the kids done a good job and they listened to the teacher and behaved themselves, you didn't have a problem. It was only the students who came to school that had a chip on their shoulder, and I think at time came from a family where there was no discipline at all, and the kids were just allowed to run wild. So I think in the number of years that I was at school, I can remember maybe 5 or 6 children that had the strap. And sitting back and remembering watching the kids misbehaving and not paying attention to the teacher, it was deserving. And right now, they found out that, timeout is probably a lot better system where the teacher just makes them go in a back room or something and sits by themselves for an hour or two and does a timeout or gets sent home for a day or two. And I can remember with my uncle, he said, if you come home from school and you tell me you got the strap for something, I'll check it out. And if the teacher is right, you get another one. So you get two straps. You get one from him and one from me too. So we always had a little bit of fear there. You always had a little fear about, oh my God, if I get home, I got to get the strap too. So I have nothing but good things to say about that. But I can see it being a situation where, some kid got the strap and went home and talked to his dad or his mom, and they took the kid's side rather than taking a look at the other side. Now, as a general rule, if you have 3 or 4 kids in your family and 2 of them or 3 of them are behaving good and the other one doesn't behave, well, the timeout by spending some time in your room, all by yourself without any toys, is pretty darn effective, and I've seen that work. And but there has to be some kind of a you have to pay attention. And it's the same as the traffic laws. If you're driving down the highway and the speed limit is 65 miles an hour and you get caught for doing 90, you have to pay the price. And that hasn't changed much over the years. The only thing we've seen now, it's really tough. I feel sorry for the police system now, because now with the way things are going, the drug thing is wide open, and in BC they opened the door, and drugs are flowing freely all over the place. So any person or any child who is a little bit depressed and couldn't figure out where they were in life and didn't have much discipline at home may find where they just went on to drugs, because drugs lets them fly. Take a shot of drugs and you can sit there and lay back and everything. If the world goes by and you sit there and have a rest and go to sleep, and drugs take over the operation of your life, so you have no responsibility. So I'm from the old school, and talking about the old school, hopefully there'll be some people with stories about the same thing. And I guess we have to, as a senior, we have to risk speaking up and being labeled as a complainer or a bitcher, in other words. If you're driving down, if you've got a side road going out to your place in the country, and the side road's got a big pothole that's a foot deep in there, and darn well you're paying the taxes to have that repaired. So you go down there, and also suddenly you get the wheel knocked off your car or a shock knocked off, and you have to pay to have that put back on again. Maybe have a wheel alignment done, so the whole thing might cost you maybe $400 or $500 to get the repair done. And then you start putting 2 and 2 together, and you start saying, "Oh my God, this is awful. Took a bunch of money out of my pocket. Now I can't buy food for my family." But if you take a look at the big picture, in the old system in highways, they had the foreman. Each area had a foreman. And the foreman answered to a district manager, and the district manager answered to the regional director. Now, the regional director in our area was very good, and he got all the foremen together and once a year, and he would lay the law down and say, "Look, guys, I don't want the highways minister calling me about a pothole in your area. So you have the equipment, and you have the responsibility, and I'm telling you now what your responsibility is. So if you've got a pothole in your road, get yourself out there and fix the damn thing, repair it, and save damage to your car and save damage to all the other cars in the country." So he put the responsibility on the road foreman in the area to do their own inspection. And he said, he told the foreman, "I don't want the highways minister calling me up saying that somebody got the wheel knocked off his car in Selmo or Creston or wherever the case it was, or Cranbrook, because that's your job, and your job is to pay attention to do the maintenance in your area. So in the springtime, you get a crew out there, men, and you have a patching, one of those vibratory rollers, and you have a pavement cutter, and you cut the hole in the pavement out, and you put some new pavement in, and you hammer it into place and patch it up, and you patch the hole to save the damage to your vehicle and all the other vehicles in the country, including the school buses and all the vehicles that travel that area. So he put the responsibility for inspection directly on the foreman. Now, nothing has changed too much in the fact that with privatization now, there's always a profit margin. So the contractor has to do the work. And if he doesn't do the work, we have the road in bad shape and vehicles are being damaged going down the road. And there's always a chance of accidents where the wheel gets knocked off the car and the car gets upset accident. And then the operator can be injured or killed, and the responsibility for the whole thing goes back to a lack of a pothole repair on the highway. Now, in the old system, the district highways manager and the regional director put the responsibility directly on the foreman. You got a hole out there? You'll see it when you're driving around, so open your eyes up, and when you see a hole, get it fixed. And get a patching program going early in the spring where you get out there and fix all those holes from end to end. Now, there's no such thing as trying to save money, because the money in saving is the saving to the vehicle damaged for your vehicle and all the other vehicles that go down the highway. So we save the money by doing the preventive maintenance to the road system and keeping it in good shape to prevent vehicle damage for all the private cars and the public cars going down that highway and the buses and all those units. So that's accident prevention in operation. Now, if you have a system now where we have an inspector on highway staff who goes out and sees that there's some potholes on the road, so he writes up an NCR report telling the contractor, you got a bunch of potholes out in your road there and they don't comply with what the contract says. And then the contractor says, well, I have my own inspector out there and he just came back from doing that, and he says that there are no potholes. So it becomes a urinating contest, if you please, where the two inspectors are arguing against one another. Now, a good friend of mine, Jeff Warrington, who was a mechanical superintendent at one time, he became a district manager in one of the foreman areas in Region 4. So what was happening, he was getting the contract inspector on highways reporting non-compliance with road fault conditions. So the inspector would write the complaint up, non-conformance report, say it doesn't conform with what it says in the contract. So then the contract manager would go to his inspector and say, well, go out and have a look at that. And they would write a report contradicting the other one. So Jeff is a very, very, very smart man. So what he did, he got fed up with his passing the buck and everybody not doing the work and just writing reports back in an argument between two people. So what he did, he'd get 4 or 5 of the reports on his desk, and he'd call up the contract inspector from his area and say, "What's going on?" He'd say, "Well, they're lying about the repairs." So then what Jeff did would phone the contractor and say, "Okay, I want you and your inspector and our inspector to come in my car, and we're going to go out and we're going to take all those papers and we're going to drive out to the job site and do an actual investigation." So he did that a few times, and all of a sudden there's a whole bunch of egg being scraped off the face. So he would say, well, here's a report about this pothole on mile so-and-so, and it's not repaired. And my inspector said it was not done, and your inspector said it was done. So what the hell's going on here? So my friend Jeff was from the old school. So I guess in life now, the responsibility falls back on our shoulders as taxpayers. So if you have an inspection process going on in the field where the government inspector is turning around and saying, okay, in writing to the district manager, there are some serious potholes out there, and he takes photographs and takes pictures, and then the contractor just ignores it and goes out and sends his paid inspector out, and they write a report back saying that the other inspector is wrong. Well, if it's a picture with a camera, it can't be wrong. So the camera, a date stamp camera is the best way to do that as an inspector. So, as a taxpayer, you and I are sitting back there looking. So, I would invite you to, if you've got a bunch of potholes in your road system in your area, or whether it's snow plowing or sanding in the wintertime is not being done, I would encourage you to take a date stamp camera or a video camera and film the thing, and make a written report to the highways manager, and then do a follow up and say, look, we're not going to put up with this kind of nonsense. So get your two inspectors out here, and I have a report. I'm the taxpayer. I'm the guy that does it. And if you're telling me it's being done and the contract inspector with highways is saying it's not done, he's right, and he's sticking up for me. Now, if you've got an inspector under contract management, who's paid by the contractor not to do the work, and he's arguing against the other contractor who's got pictures, other contract inspector, we simply take them all together, go and have a look. You can do the same thing by just taking a video camera and doing the work and show it to them. You can put it on a wall on a projector, anything you want. Well, all I'm saying is that the responsibility for that road falls back in our lap as a taxpayer. And you're from the old school, whether you like it or not. That's the way it used to be. So I would ask that you have yourself a great evening, and it was a rainy day here in Nelson, rain to beat heck, and have yourself a great evening and all the pleasure of life to you being a senior. And we hope your retirement offers a lot of challenge to you, and you live for a long, healthy years. So have yourself a good evening. Good night.